Kevin, Jonathon, good to see you. How are you both doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great, James. Good to be on.
Good. Yeah, thanks for kicking this off. Looking forward to, we've got James, your CEO, straight after this. Jonathon, he's sitting there watching in the background. So looking forward to this conversation. Just to kick off, just to help us set the scene a little bit, get a bit of context of your roles. Kevin, can you just introduce your role, the business, and the responsibility you have in terms of sales team coverage?
Sure. I'm sales director at Monotype. We're the largest font foundry in the world, licensing some of the most popular typefaces for commercial use and providing an enterprise font management platform that allows businesses to better procure, manage, and collaborate with font software at scale, right? Ensuring brand governance. So sort of like the Spotify of the font software world. I'm currently overseeing the mid-market and enterprise teams across the UK and Australia. And I'm also in the process right now of building a new enterprise team out of Singapore. And there are currently 22 people in my org.
Fantastic. Jonathon?
Yeah, sure. Good to see everyone. So just in terms of Cognism, a bit back to the story there. So yeah, we're the leader in B2B contact data, HQ'd in the UK. As Owen said, I've been in the business approaching nearly 6 years. Initially was an IC, and then I managed our UK operations, and now moving across managing our US team, our DAC team, and our US DAC and UK, and then soon to be the US. And collectively, there's around 150 people in the sales org. So yeah, quite a big team.
That's a good run from being an SDR all those years ago, Jonathon.
Yeah, a lot of grey hairs in the process, but
fantastic. Well done. No, excited for you. You've done really well. One of the things that we do is we get a lot of international movement. We've got people from Europe on this call. We've got people that have obviously moved from the US to the UK. Kevin, I was just curious on your decision to move from the US to the UK and what challenges you've seen in terms of building out a sales org in the UK and Europe versus your experience in the US to begin with.
It wasn't an easy decision, but it's been the most rewarding decision of my life, I would say, thus far. At the time, I had the opportunity to move into management out of our New York office, or had the opportunity to come to London. And I noticed that the market here, or the team here, was about like 3-4 years behind. And we were really pushing forward in the States with like our deal sizes and the way that we were constructing the deals and licensing. And I just saw an opportunity to really make an impact right away, rather than just holding the line. I really wanted to make noise in that regard. So that was really, what drove me over here. And of course, the 25 days paid annual leave is much better than the States, right? So that was also icing on the cake for me. And my expectations, coming over, I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge, just in terms of getting the teams to, embrace me and take on what I was trying to bring there. But I came in with the focus that, I really wanted to help everyone win. And I came in with that mentality that we were going to do it and we were going to exceed expectations. So it's been a super cool experience thus far overall.
And what are some of the cultural differences that you've noticed in the US versus UK, and then maybe wider Europe as well?
I guess the biggest difference, from a management perspective, was adapting my communication style, right? Just coming from New York City, very direct, sometimes looked at as being a little bit too brash. So I had to adapt my communication style there, ensuring that I had to balance candidness with diplomacy in that regard. But it made me more of an effective leader today. Right. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway, and just in terms of communication and how I had to get the message across in a different way.
Awesome. Jonathon, with all your responsibility of all these different regions across EMEA, can you just speak to some of the differences that you've had to navigate as Cognism have been scaling out the international business, some of the observations that you made, some of the things that you've seen?
Yeah, sure. I think it fundamentally comes down to when you set up these regions, where do you actually set them up? Do you do it in location, or do you do it from the UK? That was a big debate that we had initially when we started this. And I think, launching in a new region, there is cultural differences for sure. France, DAC, I actually didn't realize how backwards. You said there, Kevin, around like the UK being 3 years behind the States, like that's 3 years behind the UK. So it's like those developments. And I think one of the key things really when it comes to hiring and building a team, that's really different from the UK to the rest of Europe. Like you don't have SaaS organizations that you can go and pick the best talent from. Like you're really looking at core fundamental like skills of, you're looking at attributes of the reps right at that point and like trying to mold them to move into SaaS sales. And that's a real big change. But I think setting up the region itself, I think the key thing that everyone needs to do is like look for the right leadership team. And I think that's probably where we went a little bit wrong to begin with. And I think for me, like absolutely you need to have a individual that owns a region at a time, because it's too conflicting with like time differences to have like one overall head that oversees everything. And yeah, I'm sure we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but some of the mistakes we made initially was around that leadership, philosophy, hiring. And when we got that in place, that's when the region started ticking a little bit.
Just on hiring then, just to understand how you both think about top performing salespeople, like what are the typical attributes that you look for, Jonathon, in terms of the type of salespeople that you're hiring for? I know you've got open headcount for 5 enterprise reps at the moment, for anyone that's online, but generally what are you looking for from an attribute perspective and characteristics?
I think when we're setting up regions, actually we have to do that external to begin with, just to get that initial team in place. Like one thing that we like to do at Cognism, and I think this is why we've done so well, is like talent retention and like building progression plans for the team. So like majority of the team, as we look to grow these regions, we want to give those SDRs the ability to in 2 years be in seat for a commercial AE role, 3 years if they're really high performing to be like kind of spearheading that enterprise team. So yeah, talent wise, we always keep it pretty consistent, to be honest. Like we've got a global process that we do for hiring. We don't deviate from that. But like I said, like it's done on those core skills that we're looking for. Like we're not going to be able to get someone who's necessarily worked in SaaS sales. They might be coming from a legal background in DAC, right? But we like to really at the SDR level, bring in really high performing talent, nurture them up and then move them into AE roles. And that's consistent across every region.
Interesting. And what about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I would say we're looking for coachability right now, people who really want to learn and who are hungry for success, right? And sometimes those are like intangibles that you can't teach. Everything else, we feel like we have a really good training program. We have really good frameworks and structure at Monotype, but we're looking at a lot of the time for the intangibles, and we're not looking at job hoppers, right? So 1 year, it's just not a good look for us, and probably will get your resume or CV passed to the left, right? So that's super important as well. But also retention is something we're keen on, right? We have a very high retention rate, similar to what Jonathon is explaining with the clear progression track. But yeah, those are some of the main key points we're looking at right now, and we're hiring as well.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Have you noticed, and this is US, I'm talking US now, UK, have you noticed significant differences on how people buy your technology in terms of like what effort is required to get deals across the line? You know, maybe how many stakeholders are involved? Like, what are the differences that you've seen between the US market? And I'm asking that because, you know, obviously, Cognism, you've expanded your business into the US. There's a lot of founders on this, and there's a lot of sales leaders on this that are looking to expand into the US market. So just wondering, you know, like any advice that you can give and any differences that you come off. Jonathon, to you first.
Yeah, one that really jumps out is it's quite funny, this one. Like the US are much more open to, especially late stage. If there's another vendor in play, an example, they're much more open to vocalizing that in the sales process and actually asking for concessions here and there. Whereas in the UK, it's very much personal. They keep it to themselves. And then if you don't communicate with that person within like a 3-day window, they've gone with that vendor. Whereas in the States, they're much more vocal about that. I think one of the key differences is just like market-wise is like the price sensitivity in the US and the UK. That is a big difference that we tend to see. The competitive nature, I think the sophistication of how they buy, like the US know how to purchase software and they're usually educated in the space when they're buying that software. Whereas when you look in EMEA and you look in the UK, you're not necessarily differentiating from your competition. Like, you're actually educating them on why they actually, and it's kind of back to a news point that he talked about earlier. Like, you need to educate on the value of why they need data in the first place. We sell data as that's why. Whereas comparative to the US, it's okay, why is our solution better or works well in conjunction with another data provider? I think that's one of the key differences. They're happy to spend when they know there's an issue in the States, whereas in the UK, you really need to build that really cemented business case. There's some of the key differences I tend to see.
Great, thanks for sharing. Appreciate it, Jonathon. Kevin?
Yeah, I think we just need to engage in many more relevant stakeholders here in the UK and EMEA and abroad, right? And that also just entails like ensuring not only are we selling to the end user of the product, but that we're also getting finance involved earlier, right? Like selling it also to the CFOs of the world is what we also noticed that where we were a bit lacking, where we would sell it to our champions and those that were using it, and then they're trying to relay the business case and then getting shut down by like the CFO. So now we're much more cognizant of that and making sure that we're getting ahead of that much earlier and asking, which other stakeholders need to be involved, who's the budget owners, do we have to speak to the CFO or the finance teams earlier. In terms of negotiation, I find that the UK customers tend to be a bit more reserved and less direct compared to their US counterparts, similar to what Jonathon was saying, right? So therefore, we're just trying to avoid any sort of high pressure tactics, taking our time with our research and really building out a business case that they can then sell in, and making sure that we just align in that regard. So a lot more back and forth here than in the States. But at the end of the day, we're still able to achieve those deal sizes that we're seeing in the States now.
Interesting. Kevin, on our pre-prep call, we were talking about strategies or processes that you've implemented, to create predictability in your forecast and with kind of resource prioritization. Can you just talk us through that approach and that framework that you use? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Sure. So for me, I came from the enterprise side of selling at Monotype. So I just implemented a lot of what I was doing to be successful. And that came with like time management, preparation, and organization. So when I stepped into the management role at first, I really wanted to help my reps just organize themselves a lot better and give them the structure. I think that's a lot of times reps are looking for that from us, right? A lot of them know how to sell or, are really good at researching, but I think it's the structure component that if you can help them to really understand how to better do that, it would just be much more effective for you and also allow you to forecast better. So right now at Monotype, we have our teams working in 3-quarter intervals, right? And so it's broken down in a week. So Monday and Wednesdays are dedicated to their clients in this current quarter, right? So that could just be outreaches, proposals, working on contracts, et cetera. And we always want to block off an hour for research, right? For that 3rd quarter out. Tuesdays and Thursdays are structured for the 2nd quarter out, right? And so therefore it's only dedicated to those clients. And so we also encourage that when you're setting up those meetings, if it's for the 2nd quarter out, you try to, position it for a Tuesday, Thursday meeting. Of course, we'll accommodate the client, but we're just trying to provide that structure. And then Fridays are for that 3rd quarter out, right? And so that's where a lot of the research is happening. A lot of those first initial emails that are taking place, trying to find our champion to get us into that intro call and then that demo meeting, right? And so for us, we also look at the staging here within Salesforce, and we know at the 50%, the 75%, the 90%, or what we call proposal stage, negotiation stage, contract stage, that each takes about a month, right? So that's what we will look at for this current quarter coming up. That's all that we should be seeing in our Salesforce pipeline going into the 2nd quarter out. That should be like that 25% stage of the evaluation. That could be that discovery call, that demo call, maybe that first iteration of the proposal, right? And so each one of those could potentially take a month. So that's how we're seeing like truly a 6-month sales cycle. But we have that 3rd quarter out where you're starting to scratch the surface, trying to find that right person that can get you into that meeting. And this way, we're just ensuring that we have a rolling pipeline, a real rolling pipeline, right? We're not just putting things in blindly, but that everything is getting worked. So when we do have one-on-ones, we can just focus in on this quarter, next quarter, and then maybe that 2nd or 3rd one-on-one. Hey, how are you getting on with that 3rd quarter? And that's just changed the game for us from, having those hectic end of quarter situation, or the beginning of the quarter, always, scrambling and figuring out what's going to come about, to now ensuring that we have peace of mind across the board just with that structure. And that's rolled out with my team, and that's rolled out with the wider EMEA team here. And it's just been a really good framework that we've been leveraging.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a lot of takeaways and an ability to reduce stress from that perspective on planning out. So we're just coming up to the end of our conversation. Thanks for sharing your insights. What I'd love to get from each of you is just one parting line on, you both had rapid careers into leadership, right? And you're still evolving and developing as leaders. But what advice would you have for leaders that are making that step up in terms of how they can be an effective leader or navigate their career? Jonathon?
Yeah, I think the key one for me is every step's like a new challenge. And I think mentorship's absolutely key to this, like having someone that you can rely on at the next level up. And I think some of the advice that I've gotten, it could be one sentence or one viewpoint in how to change something. That's been absolutely integral, because you don't know everything. You step into a new role, it's quite daunting at first. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. But actually having someone who's been there within like a last 2 to 3 year period, it's great just to have someone you can bounce ideas off and get a different perspective. I think that's absolutely critical.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Kevin?
I would say always try to lead by example. Just when I think back about all of my different managers, the ones that I respected most were those that were able to prove that they can sell or teach me something of value. Be it very empathetic throughout the whole process, right? You're dealing with people's careers, especially as I'm getting higher into this, like the coaching and the way that I'm looking at how do I help people go beyond just hitting their number is super important, right? So try to stay really connected and understanding your reps or your manager's goals and a bit of what's going on in their personal lives, and try to help there. And always keep trying to learn, right? I think that's something that has helped me tremendously, whether it's reading books, whether it's working with mentors, whether it's joining peer groups, like Sales Confidence, for example. Just always keep yourself open to learning and getting perspective from your peers and those around you, especially those that are doing better than you. And just always have that winning mentality.
Great advice. Both, thank you very much for being on. Appreciate your effort, appreciate your time.